So for the next item on our agenda, we are delighted to be introducing a special fireside chat curated in partnership with Singapore Institute of Directors. The fireside chat is going to be moderated by Franziska Zimmermann, Director for Sustainability and Climate Strategy at Temasek and ESG Committee member of SID. And this will be on the important topic of board governance, stewardship for a global transition. I'll just invite Franziska to take the stage. And then joining her are our distinguished speakers. We have Mark Christopher Greaves, Chairman of ComfortDelGro Corporation. And joining him is Attorney Federico Tancongco, Senior Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer and Head of Compliance and Legal Department at BDO Unibank. Please join me in welcoming our speakers on stage. And Franziska, I'll pass the time over to you now.
Thank you so much, and we have actually a very difficult task, not just figuring out what is the right seating arrangement for us, but also I think after this rousing debate, I think our house is really hot, and we need to probably make sure that now the fire has been lit, we need to keep up that fire. I'm very pleased to be here today to have that fireside chat with my two colleagues, Mark and Federico, around why and how we must change the climate in the boardroom. There were very big and rich discussions in the morning, as I understand. We heard about the need to go faster on climate, yet also about how this is so difficult against the challenges of the geopolitical environment that we're in. We heard that the new regulations that have come on board is raising the game, is raising the stakes for both at corporates but also for financial institutions. And it's not surprising that regulators get into the game, and I think the debate has just shown it. Every day we are surrounded by the news of climate disasters, biodiversity loss, how pollution is affecting human health. So these are issues that need to be dealt with. And one of my peer colleagues in the asset owner community uses the word, these are 21st century opportunities and challenges. And I really like that phrase, 21st century challenges and opportunities, because it really brings home the point that it's no longer the remit of the CSR team, no longer the remit just of the sustainability team in companies, but actually it's now a matter where the boards need to get into the game. Not surprisingly, also as investors, we're looking more closely at how companies are governing and managing those issues, and trying to see how well company boards are equipped to deal with sustainability. But to many boards, this is new. There is no established playbook on how to do it. So what we would like to get done today is really to unpack this and leverage on Mark and Federico's rich experience in interacting with board, being part of board, on how can we do this effectively and how can we get to it. But first, I know this is a very interactive crowd, so I want to bring you into the game. If you could go back to your Slido, we would like to ask you, essentially, what do you think that boards should be focused on today to accelerate our global transition? So I'll give you all a minute to put in your thoughts, and we're going to have a word cloud appear on the screen of what you think is the most important thing for boards to focus on. First answers are coming in. I see building capacity, I see accountability, transition risks, nature, grandchildren, interesting, strategy and investments, impact, climate, nature coming in strongly. Next priority, lead by action, responsibility, KPIs. Strategy and investments, being on the ground, measures, discipline, governance structure, courage, technology, internal leadership. Very good. Capital allocation, trust, non-financial returns, net zero strategy, empowering the team, pragmatic trade-offs, transition portfolio, Awesome, awesome inputs. I really like this. It's a diverse tapestry of things that really sets the stage for us to jump into the debate. And I would like to maybe start off with you, Federico. In your role, you're actually quite uniquely placed. You have your own board, but as I understand, you have 27 subsidiaries within the bank, so you're also responsible for interacting with the boards of your subsidiaries. Do you agree with these priorities? Is there anything in those priorities that are important to you?
I don't agree you can have this many priorities. When the word first came in the 1800s, priority means one. There's no such thing as priorities. You focus on a few, you can accomplish more. The more you have, it will all be shallow. But I agree with building capacity, because if there's anyone that makes things overcome inertia, it's building capacity, and that's part of the board, and that's governance. And governance is the intersection of integrity, discipline, and humility. And that's how you see, and until you see it that way, it's not governance. It is not about a program or even assigning stuff. Unless your approach to the BCP of climate change is already part of your BAU, it is not something that you do, it is something that you are. And that has to be led by the board. I know we had a debate this morning on whether it should be top-down, down-up. This thing has to be top-down because money is involved.
Interesting. Would you agree with this, Mark? Does it need to be top-down? Is it a priority?
I think it goes both ways, doesn't it? It's top-down and it's kind of bottom-up, and hopefully it all meets in the middle, because what you need to have is complete buy-in from the organization as a whole. So it's all very well to effectively load the responsibility on the board, and the board must lead, must show the leadership, and must instill, I think, the right mindset into the organization, into the culture and value of the organization, so much so that it's absolutely critical upon first being attracted to the organization, that one of the reasons why you are so attracted to it is because it has such values. And they come from the top down, but they also start at the bottom and they work their way up. And I think one of the issues that one has at the moment is with the sort of the space in between, if you like, at the board level, at the governance level. We have rules to follow. We have regulations, which we've just been talking about. We have regulations, we have structures, we have recognized ways of recognized sets of rules and of codes that really guide our conduct and guide the way that we measure and the way that we prioritize. And when you have young people in an organization who are relatively new to it, they will bring, in fact, a lot of youthful, innovative thinking with them, which tends to be more modern, it tends to be more forward-thinking, it tends to be without baggage, and that's always very helpful. What you've got to find is that middle ground that has to be pushed by the top, but also that has to be educated by the bottom. So we're very fortunate at ComfortDelGro. We have an amazing sustainability team, some of whom are here today. It always strikes me as quite extraordinary that the average age seems to be, in the low 20s, if not possibly the late teens, and that even goes to the Sustainability Committee, and the chair of our Sustainability, who is, of course, Jessica herself, who is the youngest member of our board by quite some way. And I think we've got so much to learn from that kind of entry level, if you like, into the organization. And that will help, I think, for the education of everybody from that level up. And the leadership comes from the top level down.
Okay, I think it's both. It has to be both, but it has to be also begin with the board. Imagine the board as breaking the ground open so the thoughts from below can come up. I come from an organization that we are 20, a conglomerate of 27 corporations. I'm on top, I'm in charge of the, not just sustainability office is under me, but also corporate governance office. But see, if the board is not with you on this ride, they become your biggest obstacle because you need money. And what we do is when you have the board, they have to be the champions. It's almost, if I may refer, biblical. God does not ask for volunteers. He first looks for the champions, and then he gives you the assignment. In this case, the assignment is there. We have to look for the champions. But the new champions will have to begin with the board. But we have to unearth the new champions because Gen Z and the millennials, they are sustainability natives. You don't have to argue with them. They are the ones arguing with their parents. And we need to find that, we have to find those things out because they are the ones without the structure. But we need to put structure so that whatever ideas we have, we can execute. We can execute now, we can execute for long term. The board has to come in also. The greatest inertia is education and self-awareness. That self-awareness has to begin with the board, which has usually the oldest people. These are the people, there are a lot of the seniors, what we refer to them are people who are in that pre-departure area, holding their boarding passes, but they have the institutional memory. They knew what we stand, what we are about, but they can build that culture. They have to open it up, but that's also scary because the board has to listen to fresh ideas and be ready to let go. Because one of the things that the board must understand, as what one author has written, what got you here will not get you there, or what got you here will kill you over there. So you have to be ready and humble to work with everyone in your organization, but it's leveraging everyone in your organization. And unless you start to lead, you don't even know who's ready to walk with that ride with you.
Have you seen any successful models or examples of where that has been done, where you had fresh ideas presented to the board and the board was amazing in embracing it, or the other way around, was giving pushback and perhaps the initiative has not died but has been made better and brought back to the board? Any examples? The
only reason I can say that is I saw it in our bank. So we have, first we wanted to make as broad as possible, capacitize the board with as broad as many people and to curate who will be in that board. And even especially when we are senior management, sometimes when we bring a new senior management, their ideas can actually change some of our infrastructure. That's painful. And having to be very quick that we are not caught up in a sunk cost problem. There was at one point we were making this new building, and it turned out, because we practically own many of the properties in the area, it was better to build a campus. But we were already halfway in the price of creating that building. We decided that was not a bad investment, but there was a better investment. We had to destroy that building and start all over again. But then we found out that that was better. But see, when you are quick to execute, we see immediately if something is a mistake, so you don't increase your eventual cost. But when you get fresh new ideas, you really have to start tinkering with those ideas, because sometimes something can actually change your infrastructure or a mindset. But that is costly, and that will always be painful.
For our part, we are always taking ideas from the sustainability people in the organization who come and address the board on a regular basis. And it has contributed significantly to crafting some of the strategic turns that we've taken, some of the directions that we've gone in areas such as electric vehicles as a service, EV charging as a service, autonomous vehicles, where we've been able really to absorb what has come out of the sustainability process and say, well, yeah, we can do, not only can we significantly increase our actual sustainability contribution to the communities that we work in, but we can actually improve our financial performance at the same time. And that's the ultimate holy grail, if you like, if you can find something which actually genuinely is an addition to a community's sustainability journey, but also adds to the bottom line. And I think one of the roles of the board and of the chair in particular is to kind of navigate that path between what's good for the stakeholders as a whole and what's good for just that one group of stakeholders, namely the owners. And in a public listed corporation such as ComfortDelGro, we have investors who need returns. They aren't there just because they love zero emission targets. They are there because they have to themselves justify their existence to their own fund providers, to their own pension pot holders, and that requires dividends. It requires steady growth over time. But we're fortunate in that, generally speaking, we are able to count on fairly long-term shareholders and on high-quality shareholders who support us because we work very, very hard on navigating that relatively narrow path that I mentioned, which is the interests of the company in its totality, the holistic interests of the company. So all the communities that we engage with, all of our stakeholders, our employees, our suppliers, our customers, and the other side of the path is our investors. And if you get that balance wrong, you can find that it can be pretty disastrous. I'm reminded of a slightly light-hearted, a rare light-hearted moment in the worst of the pandemic lockdown, when there was a rather good cartoon which appeared in the Daily Telegraph in the UK by a cartoonist called Matt, I think it was. And it showed the chairman of British Airways looking out over Heathrow, which of course isn't actually owned by British Airways, it's owned by British Airports Authority, but his aeroplanes fly in and out of Terminal 5 all the time, right? So he's staring out at the runways at Terminal 5, and there is, of course, nothing happening because of lockdown. But his door bursts open, and in comes the head of his sustainability office, who says, "There's good news. We're now officially a zero-emission airline." So we managed the zero-emission journey, but we sure aren't making any money at that particular point. So you can satisfy some of the people all of the time, all of the people some of the time, but you've got to try to just keep it moving in a way that is balanced between the interests of all those different stakeholders. And that's a tricky journey.
Yeah, I understand that dichotomy, but in our head, in all of this discussion, including leadership of the board, ESG, being a critical player in transition finance, is this. The metric that matters to all of the stakeholders, of course, is business performance. We have not become a charitable institution. We were the first to issue a blue bond in Asia Pacific. If we were ahead by a week, we would have been ahead. We would have been the first in Asia. But see, we do not change. We do not believe in incentives in getting this kind of a funding, because we want this to be part of BAU, that this is part of good business. The first transition is in the mindset of the board, which begins from mere compliance to becoming an advocacy to becoming legacy. And that's why from wearing the lenses of compliance, you dispose of that lens. On the left lens, you see risk. On the other lens, you see opportunity. That's why in the early part of the year, our sustainable finance framework, where we invest, where we lend, it was about 10 categories. Our board increased it to 27. We have adopted water as our specific advocacy, whether it's plastics, whether it's sanitation, we adopted that. And we raised bonds. And we know that the money is there. It's the projects that are not. The government-approved projects that are not. We tried to raise 5 billion pesos. We got 67. In the last 2 years, we have raised it 3 times. But we are running out of projects to give it to. Now, when they ask us, why don't you give us incentives so that we can, that's not a problem. We did not give incentives. These are, you cannot, based on the terms, you cannot separate this from our normal business. Because until it becomes a normal business, it's like our diet. For as long as you call it a diet, you'll go back to it. If your only target is to wear what you want to wear because it becomes summer, no, it is your day-to-day. If it can only come day-to-day if it is part of your portfolio and it is still business, because we believe good governance and ESG is sound business.
Let me press you a bit on that point, right? And it's the point around time frames. I think everybody recognizes a business is there also to make returns. I think, generally that's an accepted principle. But the question is, does it need to be short-term? Is the returns expectation longer term? How do you manage that? In your case, Federico, and I follow your argument, you would say, if Jessica came to you and say, well, I have this idea about flying electric taxis, the technology is there, it's starting to become mature, you would say, okay, this is not making money today, I'm not going to do it. Whereas Mark, perhaps, you might take a different approach as well and say, well, actually, this may make money over time, let's explore. Can you just comment a bit on this longer term? How do you balance also innovation and investments into innovation, into future business?
There are always short-term, long-term, and medium-term results. Not all of them are immediately commercial. Like in the first part is you have to bring your clients in your journey. Because until they understand what their role is, when we give them a loan, this time the discipline is a little harder. You have to hire certain experts. There are reports that you need to make. There's an impact report that I need to see, not at the end of the expiry of the loan, but while you are moving, I need to know that our commitments, I need to be able to watch you, and you need to be able to watch yourself. Now, the first part is educating them. The three is, then you educate them, you equip them. But then, in the short term, it's really bringing them to the journey. 80% of our hard work was really making them understand what it is about. The moment our employees understood what this was all about, then the ideas came very fast, and they latched onto it, and they understood. But that part is the most difficult part. There is medium-term part, the infrastructure. The infrastructure, so when the loans, this all capacity building, so that when the loans come, then we are able to curate which one we do. We cannot be everything to everybody. We have to leverage on what are we good at, and then we focus on that, and then we go after it. And we understand that this sustainable finance is about moving an ecosystem. It's not just our client, it's also the community where our client stays. And it is also our own people. You have to move those things together, not one after the other. And you better be good at execution.
We do a lot of things that don't make money in the short term. We even do quite a lot of things that don't make money in the medium term. But we work on them, and if they don't make money, we're generally doing them not because we intend them to make money by themselves on their own, as standalone type projects, but because we intend to benefit from the learning experience, and we aim to integrate what we've learned into our mainstream activities, and therefore to benefit the bottom line of those mainstream activities. And that would include adjacencies to our fundamental basic travel business, to our buses, to our taxis, to our trains, and in areas particularly related to doing things better. So it's going to be involving technology, adoption of new technologies, improvement of current technologies, and this is something which the board, I think, takes quite a, I mean, relaxed is the wrong word, but has a fairly broad approach to that. Things do not need to be immediately profitable and providing a particular return on equity, or they don't have to be necessarily in excess of WACC, and in fact you can afford to carry losses in some things for quite some time. We have incorporated a specific vehicle called CDG Ventures, which is an in-house development capital bucket of money, which we allocate solely to funding innovative new transport and mobility adjacencies, which are leading drivers of future sustainability, particularly for urbanization and urban mobility. And that's something that we've found extremely useful as a seeding ground for ideas that then get incorporated into our mainstream business. So whilst there's always that eye, as you say, to not being ourselves a charitable organization, quite a lot of things happen that might well give you the impression that that's not the case at the entity level or at the unit level. And we engage with communities in a way that is fundamentally, bottom line wise, quite costly. Indeed, I made reference earlier to the ComfortDelGro sustainability team, some of whom are hopefully still here, haven't left yet. And if you think, cast your mind back 25 years ago, there was no sustainability team, there was no sustainability theme, there was no sustainability activity, and hence, guess what? There was no sustainability cost. There was no governance of sustainability, there was no reporting of sustainability, there was no measuring, there was no monitoring. I mean, it's kind of like this entire sustainability machinery has emerged over the past quarter of a decade. It's obviously costly, you only have to look at the headcount, but it's actually in itself a positive investment that we have made and that we continue to make, because we know that its contribution to our bottom line is not what it does itself. It isn't per se a profit center, but it's what it brings to the organization as a whole. And it's what our investors increasingly are expecting to see. So it's a question of aligning what we do with what our investors would like us to do. And then we feel that we have the right kinds of investors because they are buying into our whole story, and they feel they've got the right kind of investments because they bought into and they are supporting a company that listens to what they want to see happen and actually engages with that and makes it happen. I mean, I took the precaution of actually printing something out, which I'm now just going to read to you briefly, if I may. And this is my crib sheet. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I'm just going to read you the sort of key bits. What is, in corporate governance and the board of directors roles, what is the role of the board in its approach to sustainable finance? Right? Now, this is quite interesting. It was written by somebody whose name will be well known to everybody in this room. The role of the board can be summarized really in 5 points: strategic oversight, risk management, approval of policies and frameworks, monitoring and accountability, and stakeholder engagement. All stakeholders, obviously, including the shareholders. What is the role of corporate governance? Well, similarly, 5 points: policy development, transparency and reporting, regulatory compliance, internal controls and audits, ethics and integrity. Now, how does all of that take you to sustainable finance and unlocking sources of sustainable finance, which ultimately is what this conference really is all about? Well, if you integrate sustainable finance into your strategy as a company, this will truly guide you and steer you towards your own sustainability goals and to meeting them. And the key options, obviously, things that people in this room are very familiar with, like green bonds and investments and ESG metrics generally, but all these things contribute to long-term value creation. So, to finish reading, if I may, in essence, the board provides strategic oversight and approval, while corporate governance structures ensure that sustainable finance practices are implemented effectively and transparently. Together, these play a vital role in guiding and shaping a company's approach to sustainable finance, ensuring it is both strategic and compliant. Now, that's the end of the thought piece that I wanted just to read to you, and I've only read you the key highlights. But it is written by someone we've hardly heard mentioned today, which is artificial intelligence. This is, in fact, written by ChatGPT, verbatim. Now, I find that that's a little bit dry. To me, it just regurgitates Wikipedia or stuff like that. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because I find quite surprising that today we've barely heard mention of AI. Now, many of the challenges which I think we face, frankly, globally in sustainability, AI can be a really powerful enabler if we allow it to do its job. Now, there was brief reference to it in terms of the nature of regulation in Singapore from our debate that we've just had. And I don't think you really needed AI to tell you that Singapore is the most regulated country in Southeast Asia. But obviously, China would probably be one of the most regulated countries in Asia if we broadened the geographic remit. I don't think we needed AI to tell us that, but I think we can make an awful lot of mileage out of harnessing AI, in particular in data collection, in data evaluation, in the entire sustainability journey that we've been talking about today. But it leaves out, I think, the humanistic aspect. And this is what I think I would say about the role of corporate governance and the board in this journey. It's the board itself that has to champion the integration of sustainability actually in everything the organization does. Okay, so it's not just a sort of niche thing called sustainability. Now, we have a sustainability team, yes, and I said they're not a profit center, but that's because they're a part of every single thing that the organization does. They are embedded in effectively every activity the ComfortDelGro Corporation is engaged in. And the most important thing is that the leadership of that team and the guidance it gets from your sustainability committee, which we still believe to be a critical part of our governance structure, we think that is absolutely crucial, and it's the people who matter. We are absolutely blessed in ComfortDelGro to have Jessica doing her bit for us, because she really is an icon in this particular field, not just in Singapore, but frankly, globally. But our team, led by Jonathan Chong and his people, are also just quite extraordinary, and I cannot sing their praises too highly. And yet they're not a profit center. Now, isn't that remarkable? Because normally you should be singing the praises of, the highest scoring salesman of the year, or the guy who heads the business unit that has the highest return on capital, and you'd give him more money to do this and the other with. But no, this organization's core is this activity. And on our own zero emission journey, which we're pretty well advanced on, we crossed the line this year, and we got 50% of our total fleet worldwide is low emission vehicles, and growing all the time, of course. In our journey, they are absolutely critical and will continue to be, and the board wholeheartedly embraces that and has to. In times gone by, boards would be quite difficult about spending money on things that don't actually themselves make money. So even if you cast your mind way back over the years, internal audit used to be a sort of hated group of people, but they're now rather embraced. But sustainability, absolutely embraced.
Two things. You said two things. Embed it. It's the board's job to champion it and to integrate it. In our case, we have a steering committee for sustainability, but the board takes ownership. How did we do that? We spread out the work of sustainability across our 4 boards. Our executive committee, our board audit committee, our risk committee, and our corporate governance committee. Our 11 directors are spread across their 4 committees, so you cannot be a member of the board without your hands getting dirty, because it's in the details that becomes difficult. One, the board audit committee is on top of compliance and internal audit. They are the ones who make sure that whatever we said, whether our targets or our public statements, that they are able to watch that we're on track. Our risk committee, they look at it from the point of view of lens and stress testing, and trying to see the risk of the investments or the lending. But then also, we have our corporate governance committee that goes over our sustainability report after it has aligned with international standards. And then also, our ExCom that looks, now every time when you submit a loan proposal or investment proposal, there is always a line as to the impact on ESG. So that's part of every investment and credit decision. Now, a true test of all of this is what do you do when you go through a pandemic like the last pandemic? That is where we saw, and our board shown, including our senior management, and in the middle of the pandemic, we never stopped declaring the dividends. Not only that, we ensured that we have the ability to execute. You can have all of the strategy that you want, but if you cannot execute, it's not going to waste. We were able to execute and kept 95% of our branches open, and we approached everything on 2 rails, digital and physical. We call it the phygital strategy. We were on the ground. So when line is down, our bank was there. We are in 95% of the municipalities of the Philippines. So we knew what was happening there. And because we were physically present, and then we added, actually in the middle of the pandemic, we added 100 more branches. We grew our IT. That is because there was a downtime of a lot of things. That is when our board studied artificial intelligence. In the last 2 years, in our annual board governance committee, we actually brought in Gartner, we brought in Boston Consulting. We went through 4 hours every year to find out how does it align with business, because we agree. It enables the human factor. So we studied what's the impact in relationship management, what's the impact on backdoor operations. Because everything then it comes to the bottom line. Because if we cannot protect the bottom line for all stakeholders, then our sustainability project costs the non-sustainability of the bank. That cannot happen. So in the middle of the pandemic, that's what happened. And then we prepared. We knew that we had to prepare. Even without knowing when the pandemic will lift, we will not go back to restart all over again. No, we restarted in the middle of the pandemic. So when the veil is lifted, we are already flying. We split our operation into 2 so that if I have a unit with 5 officers, one part is we have 2 head offices, so that when one unit is down by COVID or one unit is down, it's on a different electric grid, the other unit, if you start a report on one side, the other unit can go. So, and now that the pandemic has lifted, we are keeping that. We will not, it's like embedding your BCP into your BAU. You must be able, can you imagine having 2 offices, but then on the other part, when during BCP scenarios, you are able to deliver BAU results. That's sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. I mean, similarly, during pandemic, we kept our buses going, we kept our taxis going. There were serious challenges, but clearly people, critical frontline workers and so on, still had to get to what they needed to do. So despite those difficulties, significant measures are put in place. And we're not so much now talking sustainability per se, we're talking, as you say, BCP and how you keep things going. But as a crucial part of a community network, as you are at BDO, so we are at Comfort with SBS buses and with our own taxis. Keeping things moving is absolutely critical, and keeping things moving sustainably is even better.
So, and this is what I hear, right, from both of you, is that stakeholder engagement, that connectivity with the key stakeholder, be it your customers, the community, the employees, the broader society, is absolutely critical in order to also be able to keep the license to operate, to get the support, to be able to move forward. I would like to segue here into that conversation around also the regulatory pressures, right? We've heard a lot about, new regulations coming on board. We heard a lot, even though they might seem to be voluntary frameworks like TNFD and so forth, it is quasi-regulation. We have a lot of disclosure rules. It's something where I would like to get your perspective on is like, how do you manage through all of these new regulations? And what are also some of the approaches that you take as the board, perhaps to engage with regulators, where some of those things may seem to not really match the reality of your business or the reality of how you can implement this? I see also our technical team has put up the Slido code, so please, to the audience, if you do have questions for our panel, feel free to log them here. We have a quarter hour left on our time, so we will be happy to take some of those questions as well. But with this backdrop, perhaps the point on regulations, I don't know whether any of you would like to weigh in on this.
Sure. A quick word, first of all, of thanks to Romy for her excellent question. I mean, we do engage very actively with younger generations and future generations, but we also engage extremely actively with our employees and with our trade unions, which is the National Transport Workers Union, because here in Singapore we have this tripartisan model, and we therefore have a sort of element of the European type structure that we don't necessarily have an actual bus driver as such on the board of directors, but we do have a union appointed person on the board of directors, a gentleman called Steve Tan, who's Secretary General of the National Security Workers Union, I think. And we've always had that type of structure, so we work closely with government, with the ministries, with the Ministry of Transport, with Land Transport Authority, but also with the employee groups. But on the sustainability front, yeah, we are hugely engaged with our younger users and communities through social media, through also actual physical type engagement events in communities and in various new towns and near our depots and so on. And we have a whole range of activities that involve the families that we serve, because we have this we have kind of a vision of ComfortDelGro as being a large global family. So we're a large global family of companies, but each of our companies is itself a family for the people who work there, for the people who use their services, for the people who get on the bus, get on the train, get in the taxis, whatever it may happen to be. And we kind of embrace them. We engage very, very significantly with our communities and work with them, and that to us is really critical. We have a social mission. After all, public transport is kind of a public good. It's not free in Singapore for anybody, and that's because the Singapore philosophy is that if something is free, it's going to be wasted ultimately. There's got to be some charge for it. But it's extremely affordable, and our mission is to make it reliable, safe, and actually enjoyable. And we want people to really sort of have a quasi-lifestyle experience when they get on one of our driverless trains, for example, which have the downtown line has the world's highest reliability record, in the sense that it has the largest number of mean kilometers between failures at 8-point-something million kilometers, mean kilometers between failures, which is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, if I may. To the question, have you considered giving a seat? There were 3 questions. One, Francisca's question was on the regulators. We do regulatory engagement. In regulatory engagement, we go beyond our regulator in the Philippines. We look at what the other regulators which are the peg for our regulator, like MAS or HKMA. We try to see where the trends are. And actually, when we do adopt policies and when we do adopt strategy, we look to the region. Because if our regulator is headed there, we will be able to help them and give them data on our own experiment. We don't wait for our regulators, and we work with them. We work with them in coming up in regulatory advocacy on what we think will be helpful. The other part on giving a seat to generation or nature, we have intentionally made sure, when we look at the composition of the board, ensure that we have people. One of our independent directors came from World Wildlife Fund and had an exposure to different organizations involving sustainable finance and also transition finance. We also, one of our independent directors that we acquired is a person that has worked with IFC and spent 20 years in the Philippines involved in ESG. And we actually reach out to the UN to be able to do certain things. Our conversation will involve local, because our context is local. But since we are part of a region, we need to understand what's happening there. And so we need that articulation at the board level, because also they have a view that we will not have from our own government, across multi-organizational. So we actually pursue them, and actually we listen to them. And then this is the area, and then in terms of the young generation, we have a very, very young workforce. And some of them very young, but they are already in management. So we get to hear them, and the board engages on strategic meetings with those who are new, who bring in new ideas. But our board they themselves must go to the pain of understanding what's happening. Like what was said was AI. It's powerful, but it can also be dangerous. Cybersecurity is what keeps any bank awake at night. Our board has to go through and understand the dark web. They have to understand, they have to get an answer as to what happened to CrowdStrike. While CrowdStrike was happening, we are already engaging our board and making reports in the middle of it. They know what's happening. They know what resources are affected. They know that in 48 hours we will be back on our feet.
Yeah, just to add to that, yes, I mentioned that we engage with people like the LTA and the Ministry of Transport. And on the regulatory front, that's to have the dialogue and to try and sort of, if we can, to frame the so-called the narrative and to get things moving in the direction that we'd like it to move in. For example, in the trade-offs between regulated taxis against private hire vehicles, this kind of thing. So there's a constant dialogue going on, and as you know, there's currently a review of the P2P sector in Singapore being undertaken by the LTA. But how do you do this? Much the same way as you mentioned, Federico, there. When it comes to the regulatory side, we are effectively always ahead of the regulation. So if something needs to be done by 2026, we'll do it by 2025. So that we're ahead of the game and ready for the next upgrade, ready for the next move. And that kind of keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, the other part, if we call the board the champions of sustainability, and actually the champion of everything, it's the fact that their attitude towards technology and the attitude towards innovation. Like in our case, by intention, it is very rare that we are the first mover. We are an innovator of version 5. Allow others to test certain ideas, gets what the best of an idea. When we see somebody coming up and we understand where they are at, we try to look at what's working with that. We pick it up and we improve it 5 times over. But we only do that if we have the capacity and the bandwidth to execute. So that when we execute, even if you're ahead of the game, we will be able to catch up because we can do it, as our title says, we can do it at speed and we can do it at scale. And until we get there, we will not jump on the bandwagon.
Great. I think there's a question around priorities. So obviously, every board has many competing priorities. How do you look at this and balance between them, right? And how do you decide, is it more important to look after climate change or nature or water? Or what is it? How do you balance also sustainability topics with all the other topics? And I think another related question to that I see log is that existing management structures are actually geared towards everything that's profit making. How do you not just, as a signal from the top, say climate is important, nature is important, all sustainability topics are important, but actually can also ensure that the management systems are adapted to able to be embracing this? You talk about it's important to focus on execution and so forth, but how in practice do you do that?
Okay, it is part of the regular agenda. See, when you have a board, you have an agenda, right? And you have other matters. Before other matters, there's always a topic on what is happening here. It will involve what's happening in the market. It will involve, are we actually achieving what we're trying to do? Are we putting our money where we should put our money? In the board committees, it is always part of the regular agenda. Actually, it is always last because usually it's the longest because new ideas are being introduced. You cannot put it. We made the mistake in our risk committee of putting that in front. But since everybody was excited to discuss it, it bumped off the rest of the agenda. So we became wise. It is part of the agenda, but before other matters.
Do you have KPIs?
Again?
Do you have KPIs?
Yes, of course.
KPIs
Of course.
for sustainability as well?
Yes. Yes.
And also about management compensation, that might be another one of those levers.
Yeah, I mean, we incorporate sustainability metrics in our senior management compensation calculations and KPIs. And that forms part of the long-term incentive plans, yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
maybe to
It's
that
an element
question
of it.
about how do you adapt the management systems, that system of KPIs, the system of internal reporting, the accountability, plus the incentive through compensation.
It creates the skin in the game, as it were, and the sort of that little degree of self-interest. But the question of how do you balance sustainability as investment versus sustainability as expense is something that effectively we spoke a little bit about 20 odd minutes ago. But you don't really see it as expense. You see it as an integral part of the organization. And for the board priorities and the time spent on discussing these priorities, as you were just saying, it's a rather strange phenomenon that actually you notice board agendas and board timetables are roughly the same now, in my experience, as they were 20 years ago. But 20 years ago, you were talking essentially solely about the commercial issues, about the business. Now, in the same time frame, you are devoting probably at least 50% of the time to sustainability type issues, workplace safety and health, ESG generally. So the amount of time actually devoted, therefore, to the business and reviewing where the business has underperformed or overperformed in the previous quarter has been reduced dramatically. And I think boards have come to realize actually there's not much merit really in talking about what's happened in the past 3 months because it's pointless. It's going to happen. You want to be talking about what's going to happen in the next 3, 6, 12 months and beyond, and the strategies that you need to tweak, to adopt and adapt in various ways in order to achieve what you're aiming to get to, and that is much better informed by such things as learning about AI and discussing how it can contribute to your business. I mean, we, for example, we've rolled out predictive maintenance on our train network. So we use AI to tell us when something is soon going to break down, and we replace it in advance so that it doesn't break down, which explains the 8 million mean kilometers between failures I was talking about. And that's a highly, highly valuable addition to our overall armory when we are bidding overseas for new tenders, for new train contracts or new bus contracts, the ability to show that you have an extremely reliable operating track record. Now, that's come out of innovation, it's come out of board open thinking about what we can do and what we should invest in. It costs money to create that kind of development within your business that may not be immediately profitable, but ultimately adds to the totality of what you are bringing to the products and services that you sell. So I think boards have become much more forward-looking. And that needs to continue, and if anything, to accelerate, because the pace of change is now so rapid. And we all know Moore's law, and it doesn't appear to be stopping. So the speed of adoption and the speed of time to market of new products that are internet-based is just astonishing, and that is affecting everybody's outlook.
And that goes to the earlier comment on board composition and perhaps the need to also think very, progressively about what is the right composition of the board, what are the skills we need to bring in, and how do we make sure that we have the right counsel around us. And I think there was one comment that was saying, across Asia, there's a trend of advisory boards on sustainability coming online, right? Is that a possible avenue for boards to get additional advice, an additional way of getting inputs, and so forth? I know you have an internal sustainability committee. I know you mentioned your own champions that you brought into your board, people with background in conservation organizations, with experience in labor rights and so forth. So bringing the expertise to the board is one of the ways, but also extending the expertise through advisory board may be another one.
Well, it's I think fascinating to see, and this takes us back 50 minutes, I think, to when we actually opened this particular discussion, that the board, in our case, the board has learnt an enormous amount from the youthful members of the sustainability and ESG teams. It's quite remarkable, and you have a board which is not itself sort of Gen Z or whatever they're called, but that really does listen, because they can see the value of what's being brought to the table, to the boardroom table, by these much younger professionals presenting areas that they don't know about and they want to learn. So actually our board is very, very keen to have more time spent on the sustainability piece on a regular basis, workplace safety and health, community engagement. And it becomes less about driving buses and taxis and much more about how we're part of this changing environment that we all live in and want to contribute to as well as take from. So it's a holistic type of approach, but it's changing its nature and its composition all the time, and becoming much more sort of community-based, a community of the people who work for you, a community of the people who supply goods to you, all of your stakeholders, all of your customers. They're all kind of part of the same journey. It's not the board telling people what to do. It's a very collaborative process, and I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, two things: composition and sustainability. We have as I said, we spread out the work of sustainability across the board. So there is ownership on different aspects of sustainability. There's ownership and distributed accountability, but they are supported by a unit that's under me, which is our sustainability office. That is where we have all our Gen Zs and the millennials. People have actually worked and have done in community work, exposed to community work. They have actually are divers who used to be part of activist group. They are in that and they support the board. So they work together with that. In terms of board composition, we really have to curate, and because we ensure that the members of our board, most of, in terms of diversity and inclusion, we have, out of our 11-member boards, we have 3 women, including the chair. And our bank itself, we have 43,000 employees, 75% of that are women. And women are in 59% of senior management and in revenue-generating roles. Now, when we take a look at our board, most of them will have grown in the Philippines because they need to understand context. They grew up in the Philippines, they went to Ivy League schools, we are fairly represented with Harvard, Yale, Princeton, but a whole lot of Wharton people in our board. But across, and also different disciplines, from engineers to lawyers to accountants, even people who have worked with government. We actually have an ex-senator who used to be the chair of the Senate Finance Committee and who used to be our Secretary of Labor and Secretary of Justice. And then we have a distribution. So we want to make sure, and we have people from industry who used to be the head of the Philippine Chinese Chamber of Commerce. We need to have all of that. So we have it from all points of view. Well, one thing we cannot use is we hire this person because he is a fit to the board. We are not looking for a fit. We need people to disturb our board. So we know what we are becoming blind to. And so that composition is very, very important. It takes us time. When there's a vacancy, it really takes us time, together with the nominations committee, which my unit also supports. That's why it's strange. All of these are under me compliance. It does not, I said this is very bad for optics. People will think it's about minimum compliance. It's not about compliance, because this is about policing what we promised ourselves, and policing what we made, the declarations that we've made, and policing to ensure that we pass this on, including institutional memory. And so but the composition of the board is mission critical.
Yeah, a strategic issue for sure. Unfortunately, we are out of time. There has been so many questions logged still. We could go on, I think, another hour, honestly, but I'm sure the eco-business team will find a way of collecting those questions, having conversations with both of you, with any other board members, and, you know, sort of feedback to this community, some additional insights, and also inspire us continuously through their engagements with the broader community as well on what we can do to elevate that role of the board and make it very effective. So with this, thank you very much. It's been an inspiring discussion, so thank you for being with us. Thank you, EcoBusiness, for hosting this incredible session.
Thank you, Francisco.
You have a last
Thank you,
word.
Francisco.
Okay, I was going to say, Mark, you have a last word. But if there's anything you would want to share as a last word, what is the most critical thing you're going to take on after today?
Inclusiveness, diversity, so much to talk about, which we've barely touched on, but ultimately passion. I think the whole sustainability ESG piece is about people, and people having a passion to deliver it. And if they don't care very much about the bottom line, well, that's fine, that's not their job. It's the board's job to walk that narrow pathway that I've referred to before, that ensures that all the stakeholders are thought of.
Federico?
I agree with the passion part. The board has to be the champion. But see, I disagree with Steve Jobs that it's about passion. Passion is overrated. Passion, true passion, comes from mastery. When you are good at what you do, when you pursue excellence, success will find you. When you are good at what you do, you can execute. All the banks have the same target market. We have the same clients. We have the same strategy. The difference maker is in execution.
This is why an event like this is so critical. It helps us become better masters. So thank you, everybody. And so thank you everybody.